Okay, Ve'ela Mishpatim asher tasim lefnehem. So Parshas Mishpatim. So the Rashi, I've discussed this Rashi. Ve'ela Moshe al Rishonim, Maharishonim Misinai, just as the first ones Misinai, af Elu Misinai. So these two are also from Har Sinai. Uh, so there's he wants to emphasize that these mitzvahs are also from Har Sinai. Many explain it, and it seems to be the correct explanation because people might feel that these are civil laws dealing with money matters, with damages, with contracts. So they're not ritualistic. So they're not religious in nature. But in the Torah, everything is ritualistic. Everything is part of the Torah, and it's all Mehar Sinai. As a matter of fact, it's brought down that Reb Shimon Shkop was a Talmud of Reb Chaim. So when he applied to be I just have to shut the phone off. So. Yeah. So when he applied to be a Rav of a certain town, so he had to give a speech. Apparently, that's not something that's new today. That when you apply to be a rabbi of a town, you have to go and give a sample speech before they decide who they're going to hire. So he had to go give a speech. And shortly afterwards, he came to visit Reb Chaim in Brisk, and Reb Chaim asked him to repeat his speech. He says that at Har Sinai, the Jewish people said Na'aseh v'nishma. And so the question, everybody asked the question, what is the Na'aseh v'nishma? And why both Na'aseh and Nishma? Especially the Nishma comes after before not we say we'll do and we will hear and we will hear commentions after we say we will do. It should be the reverse. So he said that there are certain mitzvos that are very rational, logical. So there, it's something that even without a commandment, I would have some understanding for it. So nasa. But then there are mitzvos more in the ritualistic area where I need to that I would not have thought of myself, chukim as they're called. So so their nishma I accept. I will listen. I will follow. So Reb Chaim was not happy with that answer because Reb Chaim felt that we have to see that all the mitzvahs that we do as gzeros, as decrees of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so so even it would follow then that here specifically we're dealing here with civil laws, which according to Reb Shimon Shkop's speech would have been something that is a rational mitzvah. We could have said nasa. No, so Reb Chaim felt that that's not the that's not the case. Okay, now there are many terutzim to the kasha of nasa v'nishma, but but then Rashi goes on and say V'lama nismacha parshas dinim leparshas hasmizbeach. Why is parshas dinim, and especially since you use the word mishpatim, which in a sense is identified with the concept of shofet, with the judge. V'lama nismacha parshas dinim leparshas hamizbeach. Loma lecha shetasim Sanhedrin, that you should put a Sanhedrin Eitzel Hamikdash. You should put the Sanhedrin, the Bezdin Hagadol, the High Court of Israel, has to be in the Beis Hamikdash. And there's another text that says Eitzel HaMizbeach, close to the Mizbeach, because the end of the previous Sedra talks about halachas concerning the Mizbeach, concerning the altar. And so because of that, the parsha of Mishpatim is mentioned next to the parsha of the altar to tell us that the Bezdin Hagadol, the High Court of Israel, the ultimate judges of the Jewish people, they sat in the Beis Hamikdash and near the Mizbeach. Now, so we have to understand why it's that way. And then in Parsha Shovtim, in Perek, the Torah tells us there about that the going to the about if there'll be a question. Ultimately, the ultimate decision is by with the Bezdin Hagadol. So that's Perek Yud Zayin. So ki palamim chad davar la mishpat bein ladam ladam bein din ladin bein nega lenega. If a matter of judgment is hidden from you, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities, you shall rise up and ascend to the place that Hashem your God shall choose. So we have a pasuk that tells us already that the Bezdin Hagadol, the High Court of Israel, has to go to the Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem. That's the Beis Hamikdash. So we have a pasuk. So why do we need two psukim to tell it to us? Now, now I've mentioned in explaining that the Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim, the Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim talks about a Zakein Mamra. He talks about the person who disagrees with the High Court of Israel and how we deal with him and what his punishment is, and the Rambam says that a person has to view the psak of Bezdin Hagadol as the High Court of Israel as it was something that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. Now we have to understand what's the idea by it. Just that we should have that attitude, or there is something to it. Now, now Chazal tell us from a halachic perspective that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu had a din of Bezdin Hagadol, that he had the status of the High Court of Israel. And so we could raise the question when we say that Moshe Rabbeinu had the status of the High Court of Israel. So is it that he had the status of the High Court of Israel, or on the contrary, the High Court of Israel is in place of Moshe Rabbeinu? And there's a famous Ramban, I've mentioned it many, many times. The Ramban says that the theme of Chumash Shmos is the Exodus from Egypt. Okay, the Exodus of Egypt includes Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, and then the Ramban asked the question: why is it then that the end of Chumash Shmos discusses from Parshas Truma onward, discusses the building of the Mishkan? It seems that that's not in line with the general theme of Chumash Shmos. He doesn't say it, but he obviously meant that perhaps the second half of Chumash Shmos should have been in Chumash Vayikra. Chumash Vayikra discusses the avoda, the service that took place in the Mishkan. So the halachos about the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle, would have been more appropriate had it been in Chumash Vayikra. Why is it in Chumash Shmos? So the Ramban says that the purpose of the Mishkan, the purpose of the tabernacle, was to serve as a vehicle to transfer the Kedusha of Har Sinai, to transfer the sanctity of Har Sinai to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what was the Kedusha of Har Sinai? The Kedusha of Har Sinai was the presence of the Shekhinah, the presence of God. So it's not enough to see the presence of God as the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, but we have to see the Beis HaMikdash as the perpetuation and as the continuation of Maimed Har Sinai. Now, Maimed Har Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu was told, that when you leave Egypt, you will serve me. So the Har Sinai doesn't just represent the giving over of the Torah, but Har Sinai represents service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Beis HaMikdash, which was certainly the service, the center of the service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the place where the whole avoda took place. According to the Rambam, the purpose of the Beis HaMikdash was to have a place to do the avoda, the place to give the karbanos, the place to come and the shlosha regalim. But it was to, in its fullest sense, to be the perpetuation of Har Sinai. It had to be also the perpetuation of Matan Torah, the giving over of the Torah. Because the giving over of the Torah and serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai have to go hand in hand. And just as the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not come to an end when the Jewish people left Har Sinai, so too the giving of the Torah did not come to an end. Now we know. Certainly after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, Lo b'shamayim he. But when we paskin, when the shaila is paskind, it has to be seen as a perpetuation of Matan Torah. And specifically Bezdin Hagadol, regarding whom the Torah tells us, Lo sasur, do not deviate left or right from what Bezdin Hagadol paskins. Certainly that has to be seen something that as if it was given Har Sinai. A psak of Bezdin Hagadol is to be seen as something that was given at Mount Sinai, as part of Matan Torah. And so we could suggest that that's the reason why that 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 the Bezdin Hagadol had to sit in the Beis Hamikdash. Why did Bezdin Hagadol have to sit in the Beis Hamikdash? The Bezdin Hagadol had to sit in the Beis Hamikdash because the Beis Hamikdash was the perpetuation of Har Sinai. And Bezdin Hagadol was in place of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Torah was given in a manner that we should see that the psak of Bezdin Hagadol is something that was given in Har Sinai. So the Bezdin Hagadol, who is in place of Moshe Rabbeinu, has to sit in the Beis Hamikdash, which is in place of Mount Sinai, to emphasize that the psak of Bezdin Hagadol is a perpetuation of Har Sinai. Now, the presence, the sanctity of the Beis Hamikdash, the sanctity of Har Sinai emanates from the presence of God that was there. So in terms of getting psak, in getting direction in Torah, and even more than that, after all, a person could ask a question. Har Sinai, we don't see anything. Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu had a din of Bezdin Hagadol, but where do we see that in terms of Matan Torah, that Moshe Rabbeinu is functioning as a shofet, as a judge? Immediately after Matan Torah, Vayhi Mimachras in Parshas Yisro, we see that Moshe Rabbeinu sits to judge the people. But in Maimon Har Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu is getting the Torah, receives the Torah, and he brings it down. He brings it to Klal Yisrael. And he teaches Klal Yisrael the Torah. He tells, they hear from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then to whatever degree Moshe Rabbeinu repeat some of the statements, according to the Rambam, even the first two commandments, Klal Yisrael was not able to understand the words. They heard the voice of Sinai, but Moshe Rabbeinu told them what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said in Har Sinai. But we see Moshe Rabbeinu there as a teacher, as the Nosein HaTorah. We don't see him in Har Sinai in his function as the shofet, as the judge. But I think this is a mistake that many make. In other words, the judging and teaching from a halachic perspective is the same thing. When we talk about the Talmidim sat when the Dayanim were pasking shilas by the Bezdin Hagadol. Talmidim sat. The judgment decisions of Bezdin Hagadol were not just judgments. There is no separation between judging and paskening. The two have to go together. Certainly in America, there is a problem. Now, I'm not saying there were many people, even my great-grandfather, Reb Chaim, who tried not to paskin. But it's very important that psak and teaching have to go together. You can't see paskening. You can't see making a decision on a din Torah as something independent of learning and of teaching. Psak has to be a form of teaching and of learning. And this is the and everybody understands theoretically, of course, actually, unfortunately, it's not so well understood that when a person gives psak, when a person paskins a shaila, he has to paskin la'amito shel Torah. But there's an attitude that when it comes to learning, when it comes to saying a pshat in the Rambam, that we can use intellectual gymnastics to say a pshat, that if there's a contradiction in the Rambam, to somehow remove the problem, even if that's not what the Rambam meant. No, Torah has to be lamito. Why? Because teaching Torah and paskening are both part of the perpetuation of Matan Torah. Yes, we're not Bezdin Hagadol, but to some degree, whenever we paskin, whenever we learn, we have to emphasize, obviously, when you deal with a young child, you have to know how to do it. But there has to be a focus on Amital Shel Torah. Not just trying to answer the Rambam, but trying to say the Pshat. Because what very often happens is if we have a different approach in learning, if we have a different approach in learning, ultimately that different approach that we have in learning affects how people will paskin. There is a trend. And if someone could learn with the idea of just explaining something without being concerned about whether it's the true pshat, then ultimately that will affect the approach people will paskin like. Because we have to understand that teaching Torah and paskening Torah is not a power. We are acting as the shlichim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as shlichim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have to give over. We are the agents of God. And being the agents of God, we have to give it over the way we perceive was the way God gave it over. And God gave us direction how to be able to evaluate what the halach is. And very often Chazal tell us that Eliyahu Hanavi would say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, one mentions that HaKadosh Baruch Hu discussed the Shaila and said, this is the way this one says, this is the way that one says. In other words, there are directions given how to decide what the halach is. But it has to be done with a sincerity of seeking truth. And because the idea, giving Torah has to be done as a perpetuation of Matan Torah. Now, a matter of fact, very interesting that by Yisro, that by Yisro, in Parshas Yisro, So Vayimi Machras, the Torah tells us it was the next day. And what does it mean it was the next day? So Rashi tells us, Vayim Machres, it was the day after Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai. And Moshe, so Vayim Machres, Vayeshev Moshe Lishpot Hasam. Moshe sat to judge the people. And Vayamod Amma Moshe, and the people were, in a sense, piled up there. Vayar Chosim Moshe Shkel Salam. So Yisro did not approve of the way Moshe was keeping the whole nation standing all day long. Vayomer Moshe. So Moshe explained. In other words, Yisro did not approve of the fact that everybody was coming to Moshe. He felt that this was not a sustainable approach. So Vayomer Moshe lechosno. So Moshe, in explaining Ki Yavo Elai Ha'am Lidro Shalakim, the people come to me to seek out God. And Yisro says it's not going to work. You have to have a hierarchy. You have to have judges. And if there is a question, ultimately, these questions will go to you. But where it could be judged with Sarei Lofim, Sarei Meos, whatever it is, you have judges for all different types of groups, a hierarchy of different types of groups. So this is the way that Torah could be spread. It can't be all only through one man. So Moshe, but what did Moshe think? Why did Moshe not realize what Yisro thought of? Because Moshe said, Ki yavo elai ha'am lidro shalokim. They come to me to seek God. What do you mean they come to me to seek God? Why didn't it say they come to me to seek what the halach is? But for Moshe Rabbeinu, giving over Torah was a perpetuation of Har Sinai. Vayim Machras. It's after Moshe came down from Har Sinai. To a certain degree, Maimed Har Sinai came to an end. After the second Luchos, whatever it was, it came to an end. So, but it didn't come to an end because the giving over Torah is a perpetuation of Har Sinai. And at Har Sinai, it wasn't just a intellectual study of Torah. But at Maimed Har Sinai, it was an experience. What is the Kedusha of Har Sinai? What is the sanctity of Har Sinai? What is the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash? What is the sanctity of the Mishkan? The presence of the Shekhinah. That is the perpetuation. So it's the presence of the Shekhinah. The giving over of Torah, has to be done as the continuation and the perpetuation of Har Sinai. Har Sinai, the Jewish people, in a sense, came lidroshas halakim, to sense the presence of God. And according to one text, and so even according to the other text, the Sanhedrin Bezdin Hagadol had to sit Eitzel HaMizbeach, near the altar. Why did they have to sit near the altar? The Beis Hamikdash is the perpetuation of Har Sinai. But why the focus on the altar? Why the focus? We should have Xeris Hakosov telling us about the Beis Hamikdash. Why Eitzel HaMizbeach? Why specifically by the Mizbeach? But the Mizbeach is identified with Karban, with sacrifice. And the sacrifice comes from the word karev, coming close to God. So we have to see coming to inquire halacha as an act of coming close to God. The Beis Hamikdash is the place where the Jew came close to God to sense the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to a certain degree, learning Torah has to be done in that manner also. And in a sense, we could perhaps suggest that that's part of the idea, even all of learning Torah, not just when we have a halacha, the birchas haTorah that we make in the morning. That, in a sense, is a form of dveikus, a dveikus of closeness to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. There is a machlokes, a dispute between Reb Chaim Volozhiner and the Baal HaTanya. What does Torah Lishma mean? Reb Chaim Volozhiner felt that Torah Lishma means Torah for its own sake. In a sense, on a religious level, the intellectual love of Torah. I'm not chas v'shalom saying the way Torah is learned by historians in universities. Chas v'shalom, Reb Chaim Volozhin would never have even suggested such a thing. But it's the love, the intellectual love of Torah. The way it's studied in the universities is to treat Torah as if it was a secular subject, chas v'shalom. And the Baal HaTanya said Torah Lishma means dveikus. It's Torah Lishma means learning Torah, and a part of the learning Torah is feeling the closeness to God. Now, Reb Chaim Volozhiner does not disagree that Torah brings about dveikus. On the contrary, Reb Chaim Volozhiner says in the Nefesh HaChaim that when a person learns Torah, at certain points he should stop for a minute and think about dveikus HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is probably the best method of feeling dveikus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that's not according to Chaim Volozhiner, that's not the definition of Torah Lishma. They all agree that the dveikus is important in regard to Torah. The whole machlokes, the whole dispute, is what does Torah Lishma mean? But certainly everybody admits that Torah has to be studied as something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. And because of that, even according to Chaim Volozhiner, I even have trouble using these words, that it gives us the sense of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so Lidrosh Eselikim, when we learn Torah, it's Lidrosh Eselikim. And the ultimate combination of Lidrosh Eselikim together with intellectual study of Torah and Avoda, Karban, that is coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Mizbeach represents that place where the Karbanos are given. So when someone comes to the Beis Hamikdash to the Beis Din Hagadol, who are the ultimate authorities in Jewish law. It's not coming to the Beis Din Hagadol. It's coming to the place where there is the presence of the Shekhinah. And to a certain degree, the Beis Din Hagadol was telling us what the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. And this I think, but Yisro said, he understood that Moshe Rabbeinu, that the reasons for it. And so the day after, Moshe Rabbeinu, the day after he came down from Har Sinai, he said Har Sinai didn't come to an end. We have to perpetuate Har Sinai. But Yisro understood, especially long-term, but even short-term, for Torah to be spread, Torah can't be limited to one place. Torah can't be limited to one person. One person could be the ultimate authority. And that could be taken over by a Beis Din of 70. When I say authority, it's in telling over what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to say what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said because Moshe Rabbeinu was in a position to communicate directly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Future Batei Dinim, they're able to say on the basis of their learning of the Torah. But Yisro said that it won't work. Of course, under laboratory conditions which didn't exist, that would be the best solution. But Moshe Rabbeinu will be the ultimate authority, and those that he appoints will act as his representatives, and any questions he will decide. But the fact is that it has to be done as ambassadors of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. An ambassador does not have the right to say something different than the one who sent him. An ambassador could only explain what that person meant. Teaching Torah makes us ambassadors. And even the act of learning Torah. My uncle Zatzal said that the Rambam counts the mitzvah of learning Torah and the mitzvah of teaching Torah in the Sefer HaMitzvahs is one mitzvah. Why? Because the mitzvah of learning Torah, when we learn, we teach ourselves. We become both teacher and student. So when we teach ourselves, when we learn Torah, we have to learn Torah. So in a sense, we are teaching ourselves. And when we're teaching ourselves, we have to see ourselves as ambassadors of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to ourselves. And the Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. And we have no right to try to change the message. We can only explain the message. And depending on who we're explaining the message to, we have to use different approaches. Just like any other thought. Different people have different ways of understanding. Chanoch lenar al pi darko, but it's not something that just applies to a nar. It applies to everybody. So we in explaining it, we have to see ourselves as ambassadors. And even when we explain it ourselves, we have to see ourselves as ambassadors. And in a sense, when we hear the Torah, we have to, in a sense, it has to be like we're receiving the Torah, like we're receiving the Torah from Har Sinai. We're in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so this was what Yisro, um, this was what Yisro was, that Moshe Rabbeinu was Lidrosh Hasalakim. He didn't say just to learn Torah, but Lidrosh Hasalakim, because the way we feel closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through Torah. And it's very important because there are all kinds of movements, spirituality movements on one hand, and intellectual movements on the other hand. And some of these spirituality movements, they focus on what they call spirituality, seeking closest to God. But somehow they separate that. They separate that from Torah. And then we have, on the other hand, we have people that like to intellectualize the Torah. And they want to separate that from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they learn the Torah in a manner that it doesn't create a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the Torah, we have to see as part of the Masorah. And in a sense, the Masorah is what links us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is I heard once from someone who met with my father's cousin, Rabbi David Soloveichik, that's all. He was mentioning, there was a question about a certain professor of Talmud. And Rabbi David said that the Gemara, the Torah that they learn in the courses, that's not Torah. First of all, he said he wasn't too impressed with the person's knowledge, but he says it's not Torah. And the person raised the question, why isn't it Torah? So that's because it's not Torah. What's the idea? Why isn't it Torah? Because Torah has to come lidrosh es halakim. And unfortunately, I'm not saying this about everybody, but unfortunately, many have secularized the Torah. Torah has become a form of history, a form of sociology. Almost among many, Torah has to do with all kinds of study of the past, and it's done in a manner that, in a sense, separates HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the Torah. And for it to be really Torah, Torah has to be from Har Sinai. It has to be connected. It has to be the Masorah. There has to be a sense of lidrosh es halakim, to seek out HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this was the purpose of Bezdin Hagadol. Bezdin Hagadol was the ultimate Torah authority, and they represented giving direction in Torah. And Torah has to be viewed. Certainly, there needs to be intellectual involvement, but that has to be coupled with lidrosh es halakim. And I've mentioned many times My uncle discusses the Ramban by Kiddush HaChodesh. The Rambam says that Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctification of the new month, is based on the observation of the moon, and Bezdin proclaiming the new month. But that's only so long as there is a Bezdin Hagadol, there's a High Court of Israel. But when there's no High Court of Israel that authorizes the Batei Dinim, or that can authorize the Batei Dinim, or there are no members of Bezdin Hagadol that could authorize the Batei Dinim, then the Halacha Moshe Misinai, the calendar goes into effect. And the Ramban asks the question, the Bezdin Hagadol, the High Court of Israel, came to an end when 40 years before the Churban, 40 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So, according to the Rambam, 40 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, there was no longer members of Bezdin Hagadol. There was no Bezdin Hagadol. How could they have been Mekadesh to Chodesh? How could have they declared the new month on the observation of the moon? And my uncle mentions that Bezdin Hagadol has a double capacity. On one hand, Bezdin Hagadol is the ultimate judge, the ultimate teachers of Torah Shebaal Peh, and judgment, hurrah, judgment and teaching of Torah go hand in hand, obviously. So the ultimate authority of Torah Shebaal Peh, that's only in the Lishkas Hagasus in the Beis HaMikdash. But then the Bezdin Hagadol represents the Jewish people. And it's in that capacity that they represent the Jewish people. The capacity of representing the Jewish people, they don't have to be in the Beis HaMikdash. But when it comes to their ultimate authority as the Yamud Torah Shebaal Peh, as the foundation of Torah Shebaal Peh, in its highest form, they have to sit in the Lishkas Hagasus. Why is that? But I think because the Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash is the perpetuation of Har Sinai. Har Sinai is where the Torah was given. So when it comes to perpetuation of Matan Torah, when it comes to that perspective of Bezdin Hagadol as the perpetuators of Matan Torah, it had to be in the Beis HaMikdash, which is the perpetuation of Har Sinai. However, when it comes to representing Klal Yisrael, or authorizing the Batei Dinim about who could be Mekadesh the Chodesh, that they could do even outside, because that was not something that was associated with Matan Torah. So that's the reason. And so the significance, we have to understand that the Beis HaMikdash, the Har Sinai, represents the giving over of Torah, the teaching of Torah, and judging and paskening shaylas. That's not a separate area. It's not a separate criteria. Those two have to go together. And when we separate the two, if we say one paskins but doesn't teach Torah, So, in a sense, we have an attitude that in teaching Torah we don't have to be motivated by MS. We just have to be motivated to give an intellectual approach. But even teaching of Torah, we have to understand, even where it's separated from what's officially considered psak, when we're giving shiurim, it has to be based on the fact. It has to be based on the fact that we are the ambassadors of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We are perpetuating Matan Torah, and we have to be motivated as ambassadors. We can't we can't say things that we want to say. We have to say things that we think that, according to the way we understand it, is what Hakadosh Baruch Hu meant, what the Torah meant, and what was given over to us, the Masorah.
Anyone has questions, please put them in the chat.